In the last 500 years, Filipinos have fought for freedom, unity, and equality. We have made our mark in many fields, from science and medicine to culture and the arts. We are beacons of creativity, resourcefulness, resiliency, and compassion. In 2021, the Filipino people will join the world in commemorating one of the greatest achievements of mankind, the first circumnavigation of the world. We celebrate this historic achievement by bannering an important message. Over adversity and struggles, we shall triumph, putting humanity first, always.
Mandirigmang Pilipino, dakila ang lahi ko, bayaning Pilipino sa makabagong panahon.
Good evening ulit mga kapamana, and welcome again sa ating Pamana Talks, your favorite webinar series about Philippine history and heritage. Ako po si Joel Aldor, ang inyong host for tonight. Today is May 21st, and we are still celebrating the National Heritage Month for 2021. And I'm sure you guys already know what we are celebrating this month, but well, it's still worth noting that this year we're also commemorating the 500th anniversary of the victory of Mactan, and the 500th anniversary of the Philippine part in the first circumnavigation of the world. Kaya naman po ang ating theme for National Heritage Month is called Victory and Humanity, Upholding Filipino Heritage and Identity. Now, this theme underscores the need to strengthen public awareness and explore initiatives on advocating for the conservation and promotion of Philippine cultural heritage and the Filipino identity in this time of crisis. And so tonight, for our third Pamana Talks po for this month, we have prepared another very special feature for all of you. And this is something I'm sure many of you will appreciate, because we're going to talk about an emerging topic and concern about our Philippine heritage, in particular our Philippine modern architecture and modern built heritage. And before anything else, don't forget to like us on our Facebook page at Grupo Kalinangan. Also, follow us on our social media handles on Instagram and Twitter, as you can see on the screen right now, Grupo Kalinangan on Instagram and Twitter. Also, subscribe to our official YouTube channel at Grupo Kalinangan, and also sign up for our official newsletter via email at our website, grupokalinangan.org. And for our upcoming Pamana Talks, you can also register through our link here, grupokalinangan.org/webinar/Pamana-talks. We also invite you to please like the NHCP official Facebook page, our partner for our Pamana Talks for National Heritage Month. Like them at facebook.com/NHCP1933, and also the National Quincentennial Committee official Facebook page, facebook.com/NQC2021, to be informed of the upcoming and ongoing events regarding the Quincentennial. Ayan. So, bago po tayo tumako po sa ating talk ngayong gabi, gusto po namin bigyan kayo ng aming webinar guidance ulit para po sa mga ngayon pa lang po nanonood po. I'm sure marami po sa ating mga masugid na sumusubaybay, alam niyo na po mga webinars ngayon. But of course, there are also some people who would be new to our Pamana Talk. So for those of you joining us only today, here are our webinar guidelines. So please make sure that you view the live stream via a reliable internet connection. Check your audio and wear a nice pair of headphones so that para narinig niyo po kami ng maigi. Also, you can also view our YouTube live stream on our Grupo Kalinangan YouTube channel if you have problems viewing the Facebook live stream. Now, for all of you who are registered and who are, of course, wanting to receive an e-certificate and who are inside our GKI Pamana Community Facebook group, please make sure that you grant StreamYard the permission to see your name at streamyard.com/Facebook. So please click this link. You just have to do it only once. Para po sa mga first timers, go to this website, streamyard.com/Facebook, and click this button that you're going to see on that website, and click the button that says "Let's StreamYard see your Facebook live comments." Yeah. All the registered participants may post their questions to the speaker through the comment section in the Facebook or YouTube live stream. And of course, we'll do our best to accommodate all your questions during the time allotted for the webinar. And para po sa mga gusto ring sumama po at magtanong personally ng kanilang katanungan sa ating speaker via video conference, you can also join us through the video conference link to be posted on the GKI Pamana Community Facebook group. So just make sure that you check your camera and your mic settings so the speaker can see you. Now, to get your Pamana Talks e-certificate of participation via email, you will have to fill out the evaluation form after this webinar. The link to the evaluation form will be posted on the GKI Pamana Community Facebook group as well as on our live stream a few minutes after the online lecture ends. So you have only until 11:59 p.m. tonight to fill out the evaluation form. So make sure that you fill out the evaluation form right as soon as possible para po hindi po kayo masaraduhan ng aming evaluation form. Otherwise, better luck next time. But we only have until 11:59 p.m. tonight to in order for you to receive your e-certificate. Now, also, please ensure to enter your correct email address so that you receive your e-certificate on your inbox. Please also check your spam folder as well in case you did not receive it. Baka dun po na-filter ang inyong e-certificate. Marami po kasi nagtatanong, nasa na po ang aming e-certificate? Eh, baka naman po nasa spam nyo or baka na-mistype nyo po ang inyong email. Eh, syempre, hindi naman po naman alam kung tama po yung email address na binigyan nyo po sa amin. So, please make sure na i-type nyo po ang correct na email address. And as always, we always advocate for a culture of sharing. So, please share this webinar to your family and friends, and let's enjoy this webinar. I mean, marami po tayo matututunan dito. This is para po sa pamana. So, ayun po. And with that, marami pong mga nanonood na naman sa atin ngayon. So, bigyan po natin ng shout out ang mga ating mga sumusubaybay ngayon. So, shout out po kay Rogelio Ikdang Batong Malaki from Kidapawan City. Good evening po sa lahat. Kay Edward Perez, good evening. Kay Ayana Piquero, kay John Gilbert Bulletin from Liloan, Southern Leyte, from Sorsogon City, Mr. Garneted Olivere, good evening po sa'yo. From someone watching over YouTube, John Dave Mabanta, good evening po sa'yo. Kay Nina Manuel, Naimbaga Rabii, hi again, batch 11. And yes, hi again kay Celsius Wanchon. A healthy evening to GKI at mga kapamana. Greetings from Jiangsu University in China. Yon, marami po mga nanonood sa atin worldwide ngayon. And also to Leo Christian Lauzon, maupay na gabi, watching from Tacloban City. Yeah. Hello from La Union, Randall Bernal Brioso and Miss Marie Andepalion, good evening. Principe Royce, hello fellow heritage advocates. Good evening, watching from Iloilo City, John Patrick Magbato. And someone from the Calamba Tourism Office, magandang gabi po sa'yo. And also someone from San Pablo City in Laguna, magandang gabi rin po sa'yo. Magandang gabi rin, Sir Rob Valino. Salamat po sa inyong panonood. And also to Ju Simpao, Maya Pabengi kay Katamon Ngampu. Ayan. Tama ba ang aking pagsalita ng Kapampangan? Sana po. Ayan. And also, I would like to thank as well our partners who have always been supportive of our Pamana Talks since the beginning. The Angono Cultural Heritage Office, the Cagayan Museum, Hidden Historical Research Center, the Museo ni Magsaysay NHCP from Castilla Zambales, the Negros Museum in Bacolod City, the Bantayan Parish Museum, and the Bolhon Parish Museum in the province of Cebu, Museo ng Gumaca, the Makati Poblacion Heritage Conservation Project Facebook page. Kamusta po, Sir Dwayne? Mga kaibigan po namin sa Tuklas Pilipinas. And of course, yung mga kasama po namin sa Taguig Heritage Society and Cagayan Heritage Conservation Society. Magandang gabi po sa inyo. At yung mga kaibigan po natin sa Advocates for Heritage Preservation and of course, the Local Historical Committees Network. So, let's go ahead and get started. And I'm sure many of us watching our Pamana Talks tonight are mostly what? Architects and young architecture students because of our topic tonight. I'm pretty sure marami po kayong matututunan ngayong gabi. And as a frustrated architect myself, I'm sure marami din ako matututunan dito. You know, I actually, nakwento ko naman sa inyo, di ba? Last Friday, nung talk natin with Sir Dom Galicia. Ayan. Nakwento ko rin na I'm supposed to take up architecture, but also, I went into a different discipline. So, ayun. But I live here in Makati, and I live at the very heart of the central business district here in Legazpi Village. And I really love my home here. What I love about my place here in Makati, besides the fact that it's very cosmopolitan, very posh, and also accessible to so many nice things in the city, it's the fact that my neighborhood is dotted with so much beautiful modern heritage buildings. You can walk around Legazpi Village, Salcedo Village, Bel Air, in the San Antonio Village, and if you have a discerning eye, you'll be amazed at how many old but modern buildings are here in my city. One time, siguro pag natapos itong pandemic na to, I'm thinking of taking you guys around. Siguro mag-organize po tayo sa walking tour para makita ninyo kung gaano kaganda yung mga buildings namin dito. I remember more than a year ago, I think it was the very first Saturday after the lockdown. I think that was around March of last year. Yeah. Sobrang bagod na bagod ako dun sa bahay kasi nga biglang hindi tayo makalabas. So mga ilang araw na rin ako hindi makalabas ng bahay because of the quarantine. It was a nationwide lockdown. The whole of Luzon was in lockdown starting March. But because gusto ko talaga makalabas. I mean, naturalesa talaga sa akin na palalakwatsa ako. So I decided one Saturday afternoon to go out despite the government warnings. I took out my camera and I just went around the block, just walked around and enjoyed my my neighborhood. And for about 4 straight hours, I had a field day taking photos of all these beautiful modern buildings in my own neighborhood. Siguro i-share ko lang din yung aking I'll share my screen. This is from my Facebook account, but just to share to you kung ano yung mga photos na tinig ko. 1 second. Ayan. So this is I'll just show you some of the photos that I took from my neighborhood. I think this is the Vendida building, and then I don't know the exact names of these buildings, but these are really exceptional buildings. And what I like about taking photos of these buildings is that walang tao, walang mga harang, walang mga kotse. So the whole building facade was in full view. And yeah, I used my wide angle lens cameras here, and this is around my block. You know, these are really uh, very nice buildings that were built from the 60s all the way to the 80s. This is the NEDA sa Makati building along Amorsolo. This is the Philippine National Bank building along Legazpi Street. This is Salcedo Street. This is this is right in at smack in the middle of the a very busy street, pero dahil nga lockdown, walang mga walang mga pupunta, walang mga tao. So, the whole place was empty of people, and all you can see there are just buildings. Like this one. This is another building that I really love. Um, and the Don Jacinto building, and it's in the corner of Salcedo Street and De La Rosa. That's sa likod to ng Makati Medical Center. This is a Salamin building along Salcedo Street. Ayan, and many more buildings. The Filipino building along De La Rosa. I took more photos of these. This is actually our office, by the way. The office of Grupo Kalinangan is in this building, Zeta 2 building. Ayan. And there's an empty street along, I think this is in Rufino Street. Mm-hmm. And another old building. I mean, think of it this way. It's so annoying. It's so wonderful to, to look at these very nice architecture na, alam mo yun, hindi mo siya pinapansin sa araw-araw, but once you have the opportunity to really, take a much closer look at these buildings, you'll notice how beautiful these buildings are. And people will think Makati is just made up of skyscrapers and tall condominium buildings. Well, which is true to a certain degree, no? But what is also true is that my home city is also dotted with so many beautiful modernist buildings that were built from the 60s up to the 80s. And many of them will already fit under the category of quote-unquote cultural property, because some of them will already be considered 50 years old and up. And in the coming years, more of these buildings will be included as well in that presumed cultural properties list. And this is why I like the topic of modern architecture and modern built heritage, especially in the Philippine context. They tell stories about the beginnings and the history and heritage of an urban city like Makati, and also in the city of Manila and many other cities here in Metro Manila. But what we need to ask ourselves is Philippine modern architecture being given the same and emphasis, as Philippine colonial architecture on the discussions regarding cultural heritage conservation? And why do we think we are not yet fully grasping the concepts of modern architecture as part of our cultural heritage? These are the questions that we wish to resolve ourselves. And so in 2016, there was a roundtable and symposium and a workshop facilitated by the University of Santo Tomas College of Architecture called mASAEANaPH, which aims to create an inventory of all Philippine modern built heritage and understanding their significance. It was quite a very successful undertaking, and we're here tonight to discuss about the very recent mASEANa workshop held only early this year, being led by our guest speaker tonight. And it's going to be a very, very interesting talk, and I really encourage you guys to listen and to watch this webinar. Now, before we proceed with our talk, let me introduce our guest speaker tonight. Our guest speaker had earned her PhD in architectural theory and design from the University of Tokyo in 2007. She's a consultant for cultural heritage projects at the University of Santo Tomas Graduate School Center for Conservation of Cultural Property and the Environment in the Tropics, or USTGS-CCCPET, and was an NCCA project manager for the delimitation of the core and buffer zones of the Baroque churches of the Philippines, considered a World Heritage Site. She's also involved in a number of conservation management plan studies, including those of the walled city of Intramuros, the Basilica Minore de San Sebastian and Quiapo, and the Manila Central Post Office building. And so tonight, we're very glad to have her discuss about mASEANaPH towards the understanding, analysis, and conservation of modern Filipino architecture. So ipinakikilala ko po sa inyo si Architect Caryn Paredes-Santillian.
Hello, good
Hello,
evening,
Architect
Joel,
Caryn.
and thank
Kamusta
you
po
for
kayo?
that very nice introduction. Okay lang naman ako. Ikaw, kamusta ka?
Ayos naman. I mean, mainit. Sobrang mainit
Mainit,
ngayon.
sobrang
Ikaw ba?
super hot. It's super hot. Parang ano, no, you
Yeah.
always need to hydrate. You always need to have a fan na nakatutok sa'yo. But yeah, at least it's evening, so it's the temperature has cooled down somewhat, so a bit better
Yeah.
now.
I think sabi nga ng Pag-asa, around the second half of June, the rainy
Mhm.
season is about to start. So we still have about a month to endure
Oh
this
my gosh.
unbearable summer heat. We
Yes,
still have a month.
the humidity, it's so thick. No, when you even if you're not walking
Grabe.
or doing anything, talagang the humidity gets to you, nakakapagod. So, yeah, it's kind of scary sometimes.
So yeah, I think it's another reason for us not to go out. Besides the pandemic, it's really the
True,
heat is just
true,
unbearable. But
true.
how are you doing today? I mean, how's teaching in UST?
Oh my gosh, I had a very long day today. I had a 7 to 3 o'clock class, which reminds me I haven't logged out and I forgot to log out. But yeah, I had a class. I had a double design
Oh,
class at UST.
yeah, I have to log
Yeah, I
out as
just
well.
remembered I have to log out. Yeah, and yeah, so I had that
Yeah.
today, and it's fun. Yeah, it's super fun
Mhm.
to work with students. No, we're doing a convention center in Quezon City, but it's also tiring because you're staring at the screen the whole time, and yeah, there's
Mm.
really Zoom fatigue, no, settling in. Although we try to find our creative outlets, yeah, nakakapagod.
Siguro bukod sa pagzo-Zoom, kailangan creative outlet kaya marami nagti-TikTok ngayon.
Oh my gosh,
Although
so
I
I
haven't bought into
saw.
the craze.
I haven't either, but I've seen a lot of people get into it. But yeah, I'm not athletic, so parang no, I'm not doing that. I'm just gonna watch them. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, we are just mere spectators of their craziness.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, uh, let's proceed with your talk. I mean, a lot of people. Oh, we have a lot of spectators right now from eto si
Oh my
Anthony Divin
gosh,
Sarmiento,
hello.
one of our batch. Hello, hi Ma'am Karyn. Ayan. Eto si
Hi.
Arvin Patawaran. Good evening, watching from Bataan. Socrates Lenny. Good evening, watching from Tanawan City, Batangas. Also, Prince Wilson Macarubo. Good evening, Sir Joe, from the city of Tugigaraw. Ayun. Eto, also we have Dave Diwara, Mayad nga
Wow.
Timprano, watching from Puerto Princesa City. Ayan.
Ang varied ng
So, magandang,
audience.
oo nga, maraming nanonood. I'm pretty sure marami din po mga architects na gusto manood nitong talk na to. So, let's go ahead and get started.
All right. So, shall I share my screen? Okay.
Yes,
Hold
please.
on. Let me get.
Okay. I think it's all right. So, take it away.
All right. Thank you very much, Joel. Again, good evening, everyone, and thank you very much for joining us tonight. So, tonight I'll be talking about something that I'm very passionate about, no? Modern architecture. I'll be talking about mASEANaPH 2020 plus one. May plus one po talaga siya, and I'll tell you later why there's a plus one. It's not exactly an equation, but we're proud that that plus one is there. All right. So thank you again to Grupo Kalinangan for the very kind invitation they extended for me to join you tonight. So I hope that you enjoy my talk. So to begin, I'm just going to show you My presentation is broken down into 4 parts. So I'm going to give an introduction, then I'll talk about modern architecture, and then I'll be talking about mASEANaPH 2020 plus one, and then I'll give some suggestions for future directions. So sabi nga ni Joel, I'm an architect, and ang una kong trabaho after I graduated from the UST, I was an exhibit designer at the Museo ng Maynila and at the Ayala Museum. No, afterwards, no, the Ayala Museum, of course, went into storage technically because of its new home was being built. So I decided to go to Japan to study. And in Japan, no, I studied at the University of Tokyo. So kung mahilig kayo sa anime at sa manga, you might recognize the photo on the up left, no, which is the Yasuda Hall. And this is the peg of a lot of university buildings around Japan. So it's pretty famous, no? The University of Tokyo is also famous because of Hachiko, no? Because they said that yung amo ni Hachiko was a professor at my university, no? So we have that statue of Hachiko and his master reunited in one of our campuses, no? And so while I was there at U Tokyo, I was part of Kishida Laboratory under Dr. Shogo Kishida. And Kishida Sensei was actually working on different projects in the campus during that time. So a little about the University of Tokyo. I love the campus. No, when I got there the first time, I was totally blown away because it was in this beautiful neo-Gothic style, no, what we call the collegiate Gothic style that was very popular in a lot of Ivy League universities in the US. But you'll notice on the lower right, there's a photo of a cafeteria, no? On top of it is the photograph of Yasuda Hall, and the cafeteria at the bottom is actually partially underneath Yasuda Hall. Now, this is a very famous cafeteria. This is the Chuo refectory or cafeteria, and you access it. It's underneath, well, partially underneath this building. So you go down a set of steps accessible from the park in front of it. And then there's a bridgeway, no, that leads you to this sort of cafe on the mezzanine level. And then you go down and you can access the cafeteria, no? And this really blew me away. No? Our campus is one of the oldest in Japan. And it was just amazing for me, no, to come here and to see everything on top. No, everything was so old. It looked so old with the Gothic arches and the bricks. And then when you go underneath, there's this very modern cafeteria. So I loved the juxtaposition, no? Modern and what do you call this? Modern incorporations into heritage structures, no? Because this is actually a listed tangible property in Japan, this building. So my professor was directly involved in the conservation and modernization of the campus because, of course, universities grow, the population grows, and yeah, they have to expand. So this is Engineering Building 1. This was my home for 6 years. And it's also listed as a tangible cultural heritage of Japan. So you'll notice on the lower left, there's a picture. No, there's a hallway. And on the right side of the hallway, you'll see the original exterior of the building. And on the left side, are a set of classrooms. So the building was actually extended. No, it was retrofitted kasi medyo, I think there was something wrong with it after the war. No, it was retrofitted and it was expanded. No, to make way for the influx of students. This is the same building, no? The atriums were actually converted into student workshops, no? Mapapansin nyo, medyo madumi kasi this is the architecture part, no? You can see that it's creatively messy. And kasi in truth, no, architecture is very notorious for puyatan and for doing all of these plates. And you will notice that they have these catwalks on top. And as far as I know, these catwalks are used to take photographs if they have large scale models, no, especially if they're doing urban planning. They do large scale models, and it's used to take photographs from the top. So yeah, it's a really nice space. So another one, I remember this is one of the last projects that my professor did before I left the lab. Um, in the picture on the left, manonotice nyo yung lumang building nandito sa ilalim nung bagong building, no? And of course, since it's an old building, hindi siya pwedeng gibain because it's protected, but they needed to expand the capacity. So ang ginawa nila, they built over the building, literally. No? You'll see these supports, no, and the totally new building on top of it. So the bottom is preserved, but also there's more space for laboratories and other student areas. And this is the central library. This is actually the project of one of my good friends, Kawazoe-san, who I was in the master's and PhD program with, and now he's associate professor at the University of Tokyo. So he did the conservation of this library, and he gave us a tour in early 2020. We were in Tokyo, and he gave me a tour of this facility. And the problem with the building is that the exterior is made of stone, but the interior is still wood and stone. No? And because of the weight of the book, syempre mabigat ang libro, di ba? Medyo nagsasag na yung hindi na kaya ng building yung weight ng books. So what they did, they transferred all the books underneath the building. No? And you'll see that here. We're staring in awe at the archives. No? The archives of the building are actually underneath. And when you need something, you just enter the code, and then they'll bring, I'm not sure exactly how, but the book will be brought up to you. No, everything is tagged, so it's accessible. No, and another thing, there's this fountain. If you look at the picture on the left, there's this fountain in front of the library. All this time, I thought it was just a fountain. Pero nalaman ko, it was actually malalim. Buti pala, hindi kami nagtutulak ng mga Pinoy dyan, no? Kasi we usually made tambay there in between classes, no? And malalim pala siya because it was intended as a cistern because, of course, the interior of the building is wood and there are a lot of flammable objects inside. So if anything happens, gagamitin yung tubig sa cistern to put the fire out. But ngayon, no, that we have the modern sprinkler system, medyo pasay na si cistern. So what my friend did is that he kept the fountain. So the fountain is still there, but underneath the fountain, no, you'll see in the picture on the upper right, this is the underside of the fountain, and it's now a student area where students can have symposiums, can have talks, or it could be a study area also, no, and all this whole round area, no, it's the walls are whiteboard so they can collaborate with their teams, and it's a very, very beautiful space. And I'm amazed that they were able to do this within such an important building, no, in the campus, no. And why am I showing this to you? Bakit ko nga ba pinapakita, no? Kasi when I first got to Japan, nagulat talaga ako because when I was in Manila, I was involved. The year I left, I think, was the year that the High Alay building was torn down. It was that tumultuous time in our conservation history, and I was kind of reading up on that. Sinusundan ko siya sa dyaryo and everything, no. Pero pagdating dito, no, ibang-iba yung conception nila ng heritage. So nagulat ako, parang wow, they really are more on reinterpretation and the inclusion of innovation. So I'm showing here the Ise Shrine, which is a very important cultural property in Japan, no? And mapapansin ninyo, there are two lots here, not two adjacent lots, because the concept here is that they would rebuild the shrine every 20 years. Kasi ang ayaw nilang mawala yung skills ng mga Hapon in how they built, how they would rebuild their structures. So they have a very different concept of conservation kumpara sa atin, who are still medyo, we're still following the West in terms of conservation. We still have to kind of develop our own. So in the Philippines, usually when I talk about modern built heritage, people are like confused at first, like paano yun, no? Bakit modern built heritage? Kasi malabo siya because a lot of the people think that heritage is constrained to, for example, World Heritage sites like the Baroque churches of the Philippines, or, for example, the churches listed as National Cultural Treasures or NCTs, you know. But our built cultural heritage, the entirety of it, is more than just the pre-colonial or the colonial examples that we are aware of. This is not all of who we are. There is more to us. No? So when we talk about cultural heritage, we have to remember that it's a product and a process. No? It's a product and a process from the past, and it's for the present and the future generations. And when we talk about built heritage, it's a building or a group of buildings that has value. Ano nga ba yung value na yun? The value changes from building to building. So it's sometimes aesthetic, sometimes historical, technological, but ang importante dito, the buildings have value to a particular group of people. And that comprises heritage, no? That is pamana. So just to show you some examples of some modern examples in our World Heritage List, we have the city of Brasilia in Brazil. This is by Oscar Niemeyer and Lucio Costa. And also the White City of Tel Aviv in Israel. Also, a very good example is the Bauhaus and its sites. This is in Germany by Walter Gropius and Henry van der Velde. And of course, on the right, we would have the works of Anthony Gaudi in Barcelona, Spain. No, that's the Sagrada Familia there. All right. So now let's discuss modern architecture. Ano nga bang modern architecture? No, so according to the International Committee for Documentation and Conservation of Buildings and Sites of the Modern Movement, or DOCOMOMO, modern architecture has the following characteristics. So una sa lahat, dapat modern siya. No, ibig sabihin wala siyang hugot from the past. It's completely new. No, the style, the design is completely new. Number two, ang naka-emphasize dito is the functional or technical aspects instead of the craftsmanship. No? And lastly, the building is conscious of what it is, that it's a modern building and it expresses the principles of modern design. So some styles that embody the architecture of the modern era are the following. So Art Deco, Brutalist, Modernism, International Style, Prairie School, Streamline Modern. No? And on the right side, you'll see examples. The Chrysler Building in Manhattan, which is very famous for its Art Deco design. And below is the Robbie House by Frank Lloyd Wright. Pero yun nga that's the Western definition of modern. But paano naman ang Asian modern? Di ba dapat kasama din tayo sa dialogue, no? And this is why organizations such as the Modern Asian Architecture Network were formed. So the organization supports research on modern Asian architecture. They saw that in the books, no? For the architects here, the books that you are studying hardly contain any examples of modern Asian architecture, no? Traditional Asian architecture, yes, but modern Asian architecture, hardly no inclusions in textbooks. So they wanted to change that. Pero it's interesting, no? Sa kanilang studies, iba-iba pa rin ang lumalabas na definition ng modern. So some said it's colonial architecture, some said it's post-colonial, some said it's a hybrid, and other people said it's a form that results from transformed social realities. So also, nakita din nila na there are connections between the ASEAN conception, no? Conception of modern of as Southeast Asian nations. That's why may nagtanong, meron bang modern architecture in the ASEAN region? What is it exactly? So if there's one thing that Southeast Asian countries have in common is that a lot of us were colonized. No? This, of course, has had a huge impact on us, no? Not only on our history and societal development, but also on our built urban fabric. So this is expressed in how a lot of our buildings, no, from the colonial era are very foreign, very neoclassical, and very monumental amidst yung very humble bahay kubo and bahay na bato at kahoy natin, di ba? And so the question is, no, what happened once independence was finally granted? No, because of course, um, this is a big thing, no? When independence was finally granted, how did we express this? No, how did we express this freedom to design, freedom to express ourselves, freedom to define our identity? How was this expressed in architecture? So this was what the mASEANa project wanted to answer. So the mASEANa project was launched in 2015, and this was an initiative of the people who also formed the Modern as Asian Architecture Network. No? And it was supposed to run for 6 years until 2020. And during this time, they held yearly workshops and conferences on modern architecture in the region. So mASEANa has been to Thailand, it's been to Vietnam, it's been to Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Brunei, Cambodia, no? All of these places. Um, the mASEANa project is basically composed of three parts. First is the survey, which is basically photo documentation, no, of modern buildings in the area. Pangalawa, yung workshop. Doon natin pag-uusapan yung photo documentation natin, no? Ipaprocess natin yon. And finally, the conference where, you know, all of these new learnings are going to be presented, no? So this is the threefold thing, no, of the mASEANa project. So the mASEANa, the final stop of the mASEANa was supposed to be in Manila. No, we were the finale. We were supposed to be the finale, no? And that was supposed to be in 2020. And this is the reason na may +1 tayo. More on that later. So before the survey and workshop was held in Manila, I was invited to observe the workshop in Kuala Lumpur. So this is mASEANa Kuala Lumpur, and this was held in July 2019. So it was a face-to-face thing, no? Wala pang pandemic noon. So on the first day, you'll see here that a lot of people were gathering. There were talks on the development of modern architecture in Malaysia. There were presentations by historians, and then we were divided into groups, no? And we were told to start the survey. Yeah, we started the survey on the very first day. So I was part of group number 1, and this was composed of students. They were undergraduates, graduate students. Tapos may isang naghead, one mentor who was a professor at the UTM. So ayan, so we went out in the afternoon. This is on the first day. We went out and we took photos. We mostly had our mobile phones. And I think isa lang sa amin yung talagang may totoong point and shoot na camera. No? Most of us were using just our mobile phones. And just to show you, these are some of the buildings that we documented. So our assigned area was the University of Malaya, which is a really beautiful campus, no? And here are some of my pictures from our survey. I kind of forget what these buildings are now, no? But they were very interesting because they had, I felt that they were very tropical. No, I felt that they had a lot in common with our own modernist architecture. No, so this was actually very fun to do. This is not included in the survey, no, but they also took us on a tour of the Masjid Negara, or the National Mosque, which is a really beautiful composition of modern architecture. No, it has a lot of very poetic spaces. It's still very tropical. No, it was a very nice place to visit. So we continued our survey, you know, on the second day, and then on the afternoon of the second day, we went back to the center where the workshop was held, and we started, you know, processing our photographs and discussing them. Ang nangyari, usually the workshop is for 4 days, but in Malaysia, what they did, they shortened it to only 3 days. No. And the students were supposed to do posters. They were supposed to do a presentation on the third day, you know. So here you see, this is the group I was with, you know. These are the people I was working with in group number 1. So they actually have the posters printed overnight, and then the next day they're on display while we're working on our presentation. And then in the afternoon of the third day, we each of the 10 groups, I think it was, I'm not sure if it was 10 or 12 groups, they have a quick presentation, and then, you know, a lot of the architects, there was a big audience, no, mostly architects, historians, and they would comment on the work of the students, no? And of course, certificates were given. And if you notice, there's a guy in the frog mask, no? That is Dr. Frog, also known as Dr. Shin Muramatsu. Siya po ay Professor Emeritus of the University of Tokyo, and he's one of the pioneers of the modern Asian architecture network in mASEANa. And he was also one of my jurors when I did my PhD, when I defended my PhD. So yeah, yan po talaga ang trip niya. So he always wears that frog mask to all of the mASEANa workshops, no? So that's how he's known. And of course, at the end of the day, they had an exhibit opening. So you'll see that all the posters, these were the posters done by the students during the 3 days, and they were printed and they were mounted, for display. And there was a formal opening of the exhibit, and it was just amazing because everything, was done in the span of 3 days. All of this, medyo nakakapagod siya, but it was done in the span of 3 days. And if you want to see the results of the past surveys, I urge you to visit their website. Just Google mASEANa, the mASEANa project, and you can access these documents. They usually produce each one after a conference. So you can download them, you can read them online. They're actually very, very interesting documents that talk about, there are articles on modern architecture written by different scholars, and there's also, there's also a map, of the inventory, of all the buildings that were included in the inventory. So this is in Yangon, and also you'll see, thumbnail photographs of all the buildings that were included in the survey. So it's actually a very nice publication to have, because it has that documentation. All right, so doon naman tayo ngayon sa mASEANa PH 2020 plus 1. So one of the things that we had to define before we started the workshop was we wanted to answer what is Philippine modern architecture. We had to define what Philippine modern architecture is, just so we're all on the same page. So what we did, we had this activity. I think Joel mentioned it kanina. It's defining modern, and this was a discussion on modern built heritage, and it was at the USD in 2019. So we invited academics, scholars, government agencies to contribute to this discussion. By the way, all of these mASEANa activities are actually sponsored by different organizations, in part by the Japan Foundation, and for mASEANa Philippines Workshop, it's sponsored by the Toyota Foundation in association with the University of Tokyo. So we were able to hold this event, and during that time, one of the things that we decided on was a timeline of modern architecture. So yung unang option na present involved two timelines. May early modern ka, which is ang start niya daw American period nung pinauwi na yung mga unang pensionado, and it ends at the start of the war. And then the second period is nationalist modern, which is post-war up until the end of martial law. But we chose option 2, nationalist modern, which starts after the war, and it ends in 1986 after the Marcos administration, because it was easier to peg historical, because of course architecture responds to history. So it's easy to use history as a specific timeline, to cut specific periods in history. So what is this timeline for? Because this timeline determines, so 1945 to 1986, ito yung period, all the buildings built within that period are technically part of nationalist modern, no? So sila yung kasama sa survey. So our budget was only for Manila, no? So we identified the buildings in Manila that went under that timeline, no? And then we seeded out all the others na over or under yung set dates namin. And then the plan was we would do a visual survey, just like in Kuala Lumpur. We would do a visual survey of all of these buildings, no? And we were actually already coordinating with a lot of them. We had previously identified maybe around 220 buildings. So this was a working list, 220 buildings in Metro Manila, no? And we divided them into groups for the students to document. And then afterwards, the students would analyze the form and spaces. And then they would present, no, discuss and present their initial observations. And this would comprise the working database or initial database of modern architecture in Metro Manila. Okay, so on to the workshop itself, no? So sabi ko nga, it was supposed to be held on February 2020. Kaya lang the pandemic happened and we had to postpone, no? It was February 2020 and end of January, we already knew that this was escalating and we could not push through with it because the Department of Education had already given its protocols on gatherings, etc. So sabi namin, postpone na lang natin. So we initially postponed to June of the same year. And yeah, medyo natagalan ng team. No, I have a great team behind me. And it took us a while to figure out how to do all of this. You saw the process that they did in Kuala Lumpur. And we had to translate that whole process online. So it was very tricky, no, but we finally decided to do it online and do it both synchronously and asynchronously. And the workshop was finally held last February and March. But instead of doing it 4 days, no, 3 to 4 days like we originally planned, we did it in a span of 5 weeks. Medyo matagal, no? Medyo matagal siya because, of course, one of the reasons being we wanted to provide for asynchronous sessions. Kasi yeah, the internet in the Philippines is not all that reliable. Although I hope it's reliable tonight. No, but yeah, so we were worried about that because we had participants. No, these are the schools who participated in the mASEANa workshop. So mapapansin niyo, we have representatives from Mindanao, from Zamboanga, from Davao, from Cebu, from Iloilo, also Bulacan, Quezon, Ilocos, no, among others. So also some schools in Metro Manila. So we had 20 different institutions. Most of them were students of architecture, but we also had graduate students, mga nagma-masters na, who were part of the project, and we also had some interior design students. So it was a pretty nice mix of people. So ang ginawa namin, the participants were put in mixed groups, and a mentor was assigned to each group. So sabi nga namin, we want to promote collaboration and not competition. So basically, each student would be asked to analyze one building. Pero dahil hindi nga pwedeng lumabas yung students because of the health protocols, the photo documentation was actually done by Mr. Mel Patrick Asingsing and Mr. Ed Simon. And this was done in December of 2020. So December 2020 pa lang, tapos na kami sa documentation. And the students during the workshop were simply given access to the specific Google folder, no, that was assigned to them. So also to help them, no, to help prepare our participants, we had several keynote and module speakers, no. So I think we had a very interesting mix of topics. We started, our module 1 was more of building, no? So we were looking at the individual buildings. The second module was environment. We were looking at the entire environment that contributed to making the buildings what they are. And module 3 was beyond. So what happens now? Making the students think of future projects. So because all the buildings surveyed, included in the survey, were only in Metro Manila because of budget constraints and, of course, mobility constraints. We were worried that people might think, because this is an international workshop, we were worried that people might think na lahat ng modern architecture nasa Metro Manila lang. So we asked people from different parts of the Philippines to talk about modern architecture in their own locality. So for this, the what do you call this, the opening and closing ceremonies was open to everybody, but because we were protecting the privacy of the students, the workshop itself was private. So we gave them access to this is a Google Classroom site, and on the site we posted assignments, we posted the videos so they could watch them asynchronously, and they had assignments. They had templates to help them do their analysis. But also, we met synchronously. I think we did this twice or thrice during the 5 weeks. And this was so much fun. Isipin nyo, around 150 people discussing modern architecture. And lahat po sila pinagsalita namin. They were able to express their thoughts on modern architecture. And how did we do this? We basically used breakout rooms and divided them into different clusters and groups, but also we gave them tools for analysis. So this was the tool that we asked students to use. This was developed using Typeform, and students used this to analyze the building. So all they needed to do was they could access this from their phone or from their laptop, and they would just enter the details or click or click an option, and then all the data from this goes into an Excel file. So we have that kind of data. So these are example. You can see some of the students doing their survey with the help of their group and mentor. So habang sinasagutan nila, some of the groups, iba-iba sila ng style. Some groups did them kanya-kanya, but some groups like this one, they did it as a group, and the mentor was the whole group, and the mentor was commenting. They were looking at it using Google Street View, so they were examining the environment virtually, and they were answering the survey like that. And we also asked the students to talk about their building. So they were given templates, and they had to do a 3-minute report. All the students had to do a 3-minute report on their assigned buildings, their impressions, and their basic research. So that was also very nice. And then afterwards, we came back together, as a large group, and each cluster had to present their findings, or their impressions, based on their own discussions. Kasi yung discussions namin una by group, and then by cluster, which is bigger, and then we come together as one, and then may sharing kami. And it was very nice kasi parang there were a lot of avenues, a lot of exciting possibilities for future research that were identified. Sana nga mag-push through. And I just want to share some of the output of the mASEANa project. So of course, we have our posters. Here are some examples of the posters of the clusters. And also we have what we call story maps. So this is really cute. If you access them, you can see on the left side, there's a map, and it shows you the actual coordinates, the actual location of the building on the map. And then on the right side, you'll see a photograph and a write-up about the building. So that was done by the students. But some what do you call this? Some groups also embedded the video, so you'll actually be able to hear the students presenting about their own buildings, how they perceive these buildings. And for me, that was very interesting, because they're talking about perceptions, they're talking about how they appreciate these buildings. So that was very nice. So we also have a mASEANa Philippines channel. This is on YouTube. You can just go on YouTube and search mASEANa, and all our lectures are posted here. So please search it, and don't forget to subscribe. Also, we are also on social media. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we are on Twitter. So please look us up. Yeah, our pages are still being updated, no? With several things. So we try to update pa rin, but we encourage you to actually visit our virtual exhibit. No, and the link is here on this page, the QR code. No, and you can see here all the posters and the story maps and output that we showed you a while ago. So if you can, please do access that. So just a quick sneak peek into our data, because of course, madami yung data. No, that was 120 buildings, and we still haven't processed it totally. So I'll just show you snippets of it. So we asked students, for example, to assess how the buildings were accessible from the street, yung approach ng building, and what elements were there, no? And they said there was a driveway, a drop-off. Some said there was a park or a garden. Others said there was a water element, no? And others, just to show you the examples of the driveways, no? You have the driveways here in the PICC and the NAIA. But also here, no, this is the Philippine Nuclear Research Institute by Crescenciano de Castro and UP Diliman. And you can see, you know, approaching the building, it's a building to study nuclear science, but you can see ang lush, no, yung entry towards the building. You enter toward with this pathway, and it's bordered by greeneries on each side. So ang ganda ng pagkaka-integrate ng modern architecture dito, because we really thought about the landscape, no, and how this affects our perception of the building. So kanina entrance, ngayon naman, kanina ano pala approach, ngayon naman we're looking at entrance. So sabi namin, ano yung quality ng main entrance? So 53% said the entrances were projected, which yeah, sort of makes sense kasi super init talaga sa Pilipinas, no? Super init, tas malakas ang ulan, and of course you need that canopy to kind of protect you when you alight from the pathway, or for example, when you alight from a vehicle. No, one example here is, for example, this canopy of the Asian Institute of Tourism. This is in UP Diliman. No, you can see the kind of trapezoidal canopy that it has there. So very, very tropical. So another, we asked what other elements are there in the main entrance? So sabi nga nila, canopy, may mga stairs, of course, there are columns, but also some people said there are bridges, no? And a very nice example is the photo on the top. Now, this is the Makati City Hall. And I was actually there when the students were analyzing this, and they were like, oh, kamusta naman yung approach? And they were like, ayan, direct naman, sir. Tas, ay, may bridge. Sir, may bridge, ang galing. No, they actually realized because they were looking at it on Google Street View, no? And then as they were approaching, it's like, wow, may bridge pala, we didn't realize. The whole structure was approached via this bridge na medyo hindi na masyadong kita ngayon. Pero there was a bridge, and they said, that's such a nice entry to the building, no? And there were others, no? Other ways to introduce people into the main entrance, and some of these were, of course, our walkways, no? Kasi mainit nga sa Pilipinas, and we have to think about the comfort of the people as they go towards the building. So dahil nga mainit, we also asked about brisule. So 52.3% had it, and the ones that had brisule said only 33.3 had them all around the building, and 28.8% said they had them on only two sides. So probably the front or back, or the sides that were oriented towards the east and the west. No? And some examples there, no, the BBP, Makati, and also the Makati Stock Exchange. No? This was one of the last questions that we asked the students, and it was if they liked the building. So that was the final question. Do you like your building? Do you like the building analyzed? And we made it clear to everyone from the very beginning, okay lang na hindi nyo magustuhan yung building nyo. If you don't like it, just be honest and say, no, I don't like it. No? Because of course it's a very personal thing. But we're very happy to have seen that 90.6% like the building. So um, part of us is rejoicing because yeah, they were able to actually appreciate, upon study, they were able to appreciate um, the complexities of modern architecture. So future directions, what happens now? Here's the bottom line. Of course, we now know that these um, structures are important. No, they're very important, but we also know that there are many issues that affect modern built heritage. No, I will discuss only the first one, which is the issue of perception. This is very important, no, kasi um, this is a perception of the building, no. It's threefold, no. Perception ng mga experts, of course, yung medyo sanay na yung mata sa pagtingin ng modern architecture, may perception din na galing sa users, yung mga tao na talagang gumagamit ng building, no? Yung dun sila nagtatrabaho, dun sila yung pumapasok doon, sila yung gumagamit. But also you have the perception of the general public, no? The people na nadadaanan lang nila to sa kalye, nakikita lang nila, no? They have different levels of perception. And what you want, no, is to have a positive perception. No, because this ultimately would lead to conservation. Kaya lang, ang problema is that um, our perception of modern architecture is often colored. No, colored by what? By a lot of socio-political precedents. No, that have led to their construction. For example, the CCP during, of course, we now celebrate the CCP, but also during the time that it was built. No, a lot of people were protesting. One of the most vocal, of course, was Ninoy Aquino, who said you cannot develop culture by putting up a 50 million peso building on the bay, no, and that was a big point of contention. So if we want to conserve modern architecture, we have to do two things. No? First, we must appreciate it. And then we must learn to understand it in context. So lately, there is actually a renewed appreciation of modern architecture in the Philippines, and this is largely due to these social media pages, which I will be showing you. So first, we have the Instagram account, Brutalist Filipinas, run by Patrick Kasingsing. Also on Instagram, this is Modernist Filipinas, and this is run by both Ed Simon and Patrick Kasingsing. On Facebook, there is the Philippine Modernism Appreciation Society that is run by David Kaufman Stone. And I'm sure there are a lot more out there, but these three actually have a very wide reach. And through these platforms, they actually influence and change how people view modern architecture. Um, just the sheer number of followers that they have, no, and the sheer number of likes they have is indicative of how people are starting to see modern architecture as something beautiful again, no. So I think that now that awareness of modern architecture and its importance is slowly spreading, the time is ripe to undertake studies in modern architecture. So each of these topics that are listed here contributes to giving us a more holistic understanding of modern architecture, its how it developed, and of course its basic character. So how do we understand architecture? Let me share a brief framework. So always they ask me, how do we understand architecture? And I always say, we do a survey. Sino po isa-survey natin? So hindi po tayo magsa-survey ng tao. Ang isa-survey po natin ay buildings. Bakit? Basic theory here is that architecture, it has a lot of factors affecting it. Nandiyan na yung weather, nandiyan na yung technology, yung economy, but also you have things like history, society, politics, also concepts like power and beauty. No, all of this go into architecture, and all of this can be read in architecture. So if you want to understand architecture, the very basic way to do so is to analyze architecture itself, survey the buildings itself, no? Survey the buildings one by one. And from there, something like we did in the mASAEANa workshop. And from there, you'll get a database you'll get an initial database, no? But you say na, so sa database na yun, malalaman na natin yung character ng architecture? Not really, because from that visual survey, that's just the first step. No, you have to do an archival survey and you have to do interviews. You have to see if your initial observations from the visual survey actually make sense in the socio-political scheme, no, in which the building was conceived and built. And we do this in order to get a holistic understanding of architectural character. So we're not just looking at the building, we're not just looking at history, we're not looking at building technology and ornament, we're actually looking at all of it together. So mas holistic yung tingin natin sa architecture. And this could be applied to the analysis of a wider scope of work, as well as monographs. So you could focus on specific typologies, like for example, buildings, hospitals, no, or school buildings, or cultural buildings, or churches, no, or you could focus on specific architects. My dissertation, for example, was on the architect Leandro Luxin, no, but other studies on architects would be much appreciated. So this integrated study could result in the further definition of modern Filipino architecture. And from this understanding of the character of modern Filipino architecture comes the conservation. Bago natin ma-conserve itong architecture na to, we have to understand bakit ba natin siya kino-conserve, anong importante sa kanya, anong elements exactly ang importante sa kanya. So we have to understand these questions in able to properly conserve all of this, no? And I think we did a very good start with mASEANa, but hopefully this will be continued with other projects in other parts of the Philippines. So that's it for me. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you enjoy that, no? And I hope that you picked up something interesting to take home with you tonight. So again, arigato gozaimashita. Thank you. Maraming salamat po.
Oh, I was on mute. Maraming salamat. Arigato gozaimasu. And that was a really interesting and a very thought-provoking talk. You've given me so much questions in mind, actually, as I was watching through your presentation. That was a really wonderful lecture, by the way.
Thank you.
Ms.
I'm
Caryn.
happy that you liked it. Thank you.
Yes. So, and we encourage all of our viewers right now to please post your questions through our Facebook live stream. Marami pa po tayong mga i-discuss about our topic today. Actually, magsimula na po ako ng aking mga sariling katanungan, no? Architect Caryn, no?
Yes.
Kasi kanina dun sa simula ng iyong simula ng iyong talk, no? You specifically mentioned about the Western definitions of heritage conservation. And do you think the Philippines and the Filipinos in particular, do we have our own definition of heritage conservation that is different from the Western and even the Oriental definition, like the definition from China, the definition from Japan, even the definition from here in the ASEAN region? Do we have a Philippine definition?
That's a very interesting question, no? Ang sasagutin ko din yan ng tanong, do we have a definition of Philippine architecture? Kasi di ba, hanggat hindi natin naintindihan yun, we cannot come out with our own definition until we understand the essence of what our architecture is, what it stands for. We cannot hope to, bago tayo gumawa sa conservation, intindihin muna natin sila, di ba? Parang doktor yan, before you give the reseta, di ba? Alamin mo muna anong sakit mo, anong klaseng tao ka, 'di ba? Yung medical history mo, and it's the same in architecture. No, you have to understand architecture in context first. And to answer your question simply, no, not yet. But I think we're getting there. I think we're slowly getting there. We're working towards a definition and possibly our own definition of conservation. I think we've tried. No, there's of course, the Philippine Charter. and other such endeavors, no. But I think it still needs to be defined a bit more, no, especially with
Mhm.
regards to our built heritage. So, konting push pa, but
But you
we're
know
not
that
yet
that's the
there.
prob. Yeah, yeah, but that's the that's where the problem lies.
Mm-hmm,
Every day we're losing more and more of our built heritage, and yet we're still having a challenge, if not a problem, to fully
mm-hmm,
define what heritage conservation really is in the Philippine context, in the Philippine setting,
mm-hmm,
in the Philippine mindset. So,
mm-hmm.
meron ba tayong deadline on finally
Sana
defining
meron.
heritage conservation?
Sana meron, no? No, but we
Kasi alam mo, sa
parang ano
totoo
din
lang
yan eh.
sa totoo
Aha,
lang,
aha.
sa totoo lang, I've been watching for the longest time on the developments of the Philippine Heritage Charter. I think long before Augusto Villalon died, the yung mga usapin about the Philippine Heritage Charter has been going on, and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. I mean, it's been going on for so many years, and up till now, we still can't come up with our own charter. Much more the definition of Philippine heritage conservation. So, I think for me, we need to finally set a deadline. That's just me.
Maybe we do, no? But the thing is, ano din
Yeah.
eh, we're still a relatively young country. No, you look at
Hmm.
all of these definitions of charters, their own definitions of their own heritage. But you also look at the history of these countries. They have a longer history, a far longer. Mas matanda sila sa atin. Tayo, ano pa lang tayo, ano, bata, teenager pa lang tayo. Sila hindi eh. So we cannot, ang sa akin lang, no, we cannot compare ourselves to them. We cannot automatically jump to where they are kasi we still have a lot to go through.
Hmm.
Kailangan may pagdaanan, kailangan may process, 'di ba? Heritage is both a product and a process. And eto, kahit na, actually, yeah, nawawalan tayo ng buildings, no? And this is happening not only in the Philippines, but even in places where they have a very strong consciousness of heritage in Singapore, in Thailand, in Malaysia. Nawawalan din sila. So we're not alone. No, we're not alone in this. But
Yeah.
ang sa akin, ang pananaw ko, no? I think we should mature naturally, organically. Um, okay lang na pinupush natin, but let's not jump. No, let's not jump. I feel it's akin to making a kid wear high heels. It's not yet ready. No, the kid's not yet ready to wear high heels yet because the kid has to learn to walk first. No,
Hmm.
to walk steadily first. And that's still where we
And
are, no?
yeah.
So we can't push it
Well,
because lalabas parang hilaw. And that's what I don't want, for us to
yeah.
come up with something na hilaw.
Yeah, but I also would like to think that there has to be a political willpower from the from the agencies to
Definitely.
finally finish something. If Indonesia was able to come up with their own charter, why can't we? And there also used to be a
We
colonized
have.
country, diba? So
Yes.
alam mo yon. So well, that's just me. We just have to really push, and also have the political will to finally define it. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
moving
True.
on. So you also mentioned earlier that you have this working timeline on
Mm-hmm,
Philippine
mm-hmm.
modern architecture. You set a
Uh-huh.
particular start date and an end date. Your working timeline is from the post-war period
Yes.
until the end of the Marcos administration
Marcus
in
period. Yes.
1986. No,
Mm-hmm.
but the Western definition of modern architecture, it also includes styles from the turn of the century
Yes.
up to before the war, like eclectic Art Deco, I mean
Yes.
eclectic Art Nouveau, Art Deco. Um, does it strictly have to be after independence, or will you also include at least in probably in the periphery a different definition of built heritage, particularly Philippine built heritage during the pre-war period? Will you also consider it as part of modern Philippine architecture?
Actually, yeah, one of the discussions during our talk, no, Dean De Viana, Laurie De Viana, post a very interesting ano, sabi niya, technically everything is modern. Kasi if we look at it,
Mhm.
Spanish colonial architecture is modern, no, because it was introduced in such a way, no. So if you look at it
Mhm.
in one way, everything is modern. This
Mhm.
methodology
Yes.
actually, you know, we came up with it. It's loosely based on a methodology I used for my dissertation, no. Kasi sa una hindi mo pa alam talaga yung character. So para malaman mo yung character, you do a survey. No, you do a survey
Mhm.
and you set parameters to that survey. No, those parameters are can change. No, depending. That's the thing with academia. It's so nice because new research can tell you na, oh, this is probably something you consider. Now, a lot of people are contributing to this discussion, but also, if you have this
Mhm.
data from a particular time, when you look at it visually, no, that's what I actually did with my data. No, I mapped it out, and I saw, ay, medyo pare-pareho siya, madaming ganito, no? And you start noting down things na pare-pareho. So that's where the styles come
Mhm.
out. That's kasi
Mhm.
nga eh, baligtad tayo eh. We're not,
Yes.
our styles didn't, because in the West, they were the progenitor of these styles. No? But tayo, we're
Yeah.
simply copying the style. So what's the value in that if we're just copying it? We should look actually at the
Right.
valuation, how we made it our own. Diba? Anybody
Mhm.
can do Art Deco, anybody can do, um, for example, Brutalist. But how did we do Brutalist in particularly in the Philippines, particularly in the tropical setting? And same for Art Deco, for Streamline Modern. How do we do it in our own way? So this is why comparative analysis is very important. Itatabi mo, for example, yung building ni Luxine, vis-a-vis um, another building, not similar. We actually did this for
Mhm.
the Manila Central Post Office building. We were trying to say, why is it important? You know, and we looked at several post office buildings all around the world, and um, also the New York Central Post Office building, which really looks like it. And then when we did the architectural analysis, each of the elements one by one, doon namin nakita na, uy, hindi naman sila pareho. No, on the surface, it looks the
Mhm.
same, but they're very different spatially, no, yung space niya, pati yung form niya, no. So biglang tingin, parang, uy, magkahawig sila. Pero when you actually
Mhm.
process it, iba pala. And this is what makes it more special, no, in this setting. And then you kind of, ano, this is what I'm saying about academic research, no, supporting conservation, being the backbone of conservation, because you're actually able to prove na um, bakit siya importante? Ito po kasing study, ito yung comparative analysis, ito historical analysis, ito yung morphological analysis. And when people see it, they're like, ay, oo nga, ano? Because when you're seeing it with your own eyes, like, post office, bakit siya important? But
Mhm.
when you're doing the ano na, kaya pala. No, and people when they see the evidence na, the
Mhm.
tables and all the things we show them, they're like, ay, oo nga, no, I didn't see that because, yeah, you take it for
Yeah.
granted. It's something you see every day. Especially pag bumababa ka sa
There's
Loton, di ba?
there's this, you really have to train your eye to have that discerning look, and so that you would see those little nuances that you would never notice on the, on a day-to-day basis. Yan yung I think
Mhm.
that's what you're emphasizing here.
Yes, yes.
So,
Because even me, I
mhm.
didn't like modern architecture to begin with. And it
So,
took
mhm.
study to Japan to for me to appreciate it. Kailangan lumayo ako sa Pilipinas bago ko siya ma-appreciate.
Yes. Now you've shown earlier as well, no, kanina, that
Mhm,
conservation of modern built heritage is affected by various factors. You mentioned
mhm,
perception. There are also the other factors that you
mhm,
didn't, discuss in depth, like obsolescence, design
mhm,
intent, or boundaries, evidence of age.
mhm,
But you zeroed in somewhat on the on the factor of perception. um, uh, in particular as well with perception, how heritage conservation of modern built heritage uh, is perceived by experts, by the users of the buildings, and of course the general public. So,
mhm.
are these factors only specific to Philippine modern architecture, or are these the same issues that are also recurring or are also affecting Philippine pre-colonial and colonial built heritage? These factors are also cutting across the different timelines of our, architectural heritage. Are these
They
the same
actually
factors,
are,
or
no?
is it specific lang?
Um, no, it actually comes from a book, no, The Conservation of Modern Architecture. It's a two-part volume, and I forget the authors just now, no, but it's a very nice book, and it discusses each of these issues in turn, no, obsolescence, material obsolescence, and material is something that's very important in traditional heritage conservation, diba? We're very particular
Mm.
about material. Pero in for example, um, modern conservation, depende din, ano? Sometimes kasi we use experimental material na may hinalo sa concrete na kung ano,
Mm.
paano mo ma-replicate yun, no?
Yeah.
If you have the same ratio, you can. Pero if that material, for example, if you use something hazardous in your building, bawal na pala, no? So you have to take that away.
Mm-hmm.
Kasi there was a lot of
Yeah.
experimentation in materials going on in modern architecture. Yung parang, sige nga, gawa tayong building, gamit tayo ng plastic, gamit tayo ng ganito, tapos hindi mo alam, masama pala sa health. No, so those are the things that
Mm-hmm.
you have to filter out. But
Yeah.
this list actually only applies to modern architecture, the conservation of modern architecture, because you look at it differently than traditional heritage, no, built heritage. Kasi nga, that's one prime example, material. Sa traditional, important ang material. Sa material,
Mm.
hindi ganon, depende pa sa material, no, how it's used, the rarity of it, is it a technologically significant thing, things like that. So it's very
Yeah.
specific to modern architecture.
I see. Are those factors nationwide, or are they somewhat regionalistic in nature? Like, are these factors happening only
Mm.
in big cities like Manila? What about the other towns that also have modern built heritage? I could possibly remember a few towns that I visited around the Philippines that would have magugulat ka na lang, meron palang modern architecture ka makikita dito. I
Yes.
remember
Mm-mm.
visiting Santiago City in Isabela. There are quite a good number of theater houses built during the good half of the 20th century, and even in Subic, sa Olongapo, sa Iba, Zambales. Are these factors the same across the whole country, or are there specific factors that only appear on certain places in the country?
I think they're pretty much the same, but siguro um, the perception, especially, and other things that would vary depending on the location and depending on the use of the
Mm-hmm.
building. No, but for example, the obsolescence of use, that's a thing in the provinces. Gumawa sila ng convention center na ngayon hindi na ginagamit. Gumawa sila ng
Mm-hmm.
airport, may bagong airport na hindi ginagamit. And that's the usual thing over and over again. So
Yeah,
it's not the material that's passe, but it's the use. Gumawa sila
it's
ng
the use.
center for a technology that people don't use anymore. No, so things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a recurring theme. It just depends on the kind of building, the typology, no, the users, and of course the funding that it receives, and how funding
Yeah,
also, in how developed the area is now becoming, no, because that's one threat to modern architecture, of course, no, how how much urban encroachment, no, comes in, because a lot of these nagigiba dahil
yeah,
ay luma na siya, patayo tayong bago, di ba? It's that kind of thinking, but yeah, that's not always the case. That's why also the perception of modern architecture is very important, not only in Manila but also in other parts of the Philippines, because they have a particular flavor na parang, oy, Iloilo lang. Iloilo modern. For example, Zamboanga modern also has its own specific character, and it's also very interesting to look at, the regionalist styles that are expressed by these modern pieces of architecture. Mas expressive sila ng character kesa sa ano
okay.
eh, kesa sa ibang example. So yeah, that's interesting also.
So with this mASEANa PH workshop, and you guys are pretty elated with the results. Are you planning, or are there plans to expand your study of Philippine modern built heritage in other towns and other cities in the Philippines in the near future? Or
We
are you
actually
still
want
going to ano
to.
muna focus?
We actually want to know. Well, there's
Sorry?
still a lot in Manila. We still
Mm-hmm.
want to do that. We want to spread it out. No, that's why we involved a lot of universities, because this methodology, it's not only, it's something that's replicable. No, pwede nilang gayahin, and we urge them like,
Mm-hmm.
go if you want to do something like that. Let us know how we can help. No, ang problem lang dito is funding. Because of course the Masayana thing was
Yeah.
funded by the Toyota Foundation and the University of Tokyo, but now we have to find funding for ourselves. Um, and yeah, that's where it gets tricky. But sabi ko nga, if we start small, it doesn't have to be of the same magnitude as Masiana PH 2020 plus one. We can start small. We can start building by building, town by town, no, and then
Yeah.
build up slowly, build up this database of modern
Right.
architectural um, masterpieces, no, or compositions. And by building that database, tumatakbo na din yung research mo, tumatakbo na yung appreciation mo, no? Also in Manila, sabi ko nga, 220 buildings were initially pegged, no, na included in the
Uh,
survey. And hindi pa kompleto yung 220 on. That was just the buildings that we knew the names of. And there are lots of buildings
mhm.
that, di ba sabi mo nga kanina, naglalakad ka sa Makati and you're like, nice building, I don't know what's your name, but I'll take a picture. Di ba? And lots of
Uh,
that, because I used to work in Ayala Museum, so yung area na yon, De La Costa, no? Pag naglalakad ka doon, parang, daming maganda, ano po? And it's the back street, no? So,
yeah.
hindi mo masyado napapansin. So, there's a
Yes.
lot, and actually a lot in Makati that we still haven't, um, you know, uh, documented. So there's still a lot of
Yeah.
work to be done. But I think if
Mhm.
there's an interest and there is funding, sana may mag-fund. But if there's an interest and funding, we could probably do something with it, because we've already shown that we can get results. We can get initial results. And yeah, with more funding, we can get more
Mhm.
results. So this would only um,
Yep.
progress, you know? Hmm.
Well, we have a lot of questions already from the audience, so let's
Uh-huh.
show to them one by one. There is a question
All
coming
right.
from Mr. Principe Royce. Ito,
Mm-hmm.
question niya, are there modern buildings designed by contemporary architects as well as those who are national artists for architecture, also protected by the Heritage Act? If not, what will be the measures for preserving them?
Hi, this is a very good question, no, and very, very timely, you know. Um, One example I can think of lang is, of course, the Film Life building, which we recently lost late last year, right?
Mhm.
This was the work of Carlos Arguelles. He was not a national artist, but he used to be dean of UST architecture actually, and I was saying that he actually influenced several generations of Filipino architects. No, the training of several generations of Filipino
Mhm.
architects. No, and technically, the works of national artists, no, sa batas, they are protected by um, the heritage law. But of course, there is that presumption, and that presumption pwedeng matanggal, no? If we really want, I
Mhm.
think, nandun naman tayo eh. I think developers naman are willing to compromise, but we have to dialogue with them. We
Mhm.
have to, it's a give and take thing. We have to explain to them
Yeah.
what we want, and they will tell us what they want, and we have to find a middle ground there, no? Because I think that's easier saving something, of course it's not ideal, no, to save a little thing as opposed to saving everything, but saving something is better than saving nothing, in my opinion. So I think if
Yeah.
we have a dialogue and we can explain to them, no, we can explain to them why the building is important. Hindi natin pwede sabihin, importante siya. Tapos sabihin niya, bakit? Kasi importante siya. No, we can't do that. We have to show proof. These are developers. They rely on statistics. They rely on data. They rely on, hard facts, and we have to show them that. So you have to
Mhm.
show them, kasi po, ito, tingnan nyo to. Tapos makita nyo, ay, ang importante po sa building na to, etong element na to, tong stairs, tong colonnade, tong interior na to, tong material na to, eto po yung pagkaka-value ko sa kanila. The most important is the stairs. Second that, ganyan, ganyan. So kung may i-preserve kayo na isang bagay, please let it be the stairs because that's most evocative of this style or something, no? But at least you have a
Mhm.
compromise. You can actually tell them na eto po yung importante, eto po yung ano. Sabihin na kailangan talaga naming i-move. At least you can bargain for something. Ideally,
Okay.
I would push for preserving the entire thing, but yes, this is not a perfect world, and we have
Yeah.
to we have to be realistic. We have to be realistic, and we can't save everything, but we can save something, and we can only
Well,
save that something if we know what we're saving.
well, since you've mentioned about the film life building and how it how it eventually got lost, do you think
Hmm.
it was because of of the lack of dialogue that led to its ultimate demise?
A lack of dialogue, a lack of understanding of what its significance really was. No, in fairness to the people who were the agencies who were involved, no, they are more seasoned in the conservation of Spanish colonial and perhaps American colonial buildings, but not so much in modern. No, I think
Hmm.
this perception of the importance of modern buildings needs to filter down to them pa. No, um, the film life building, for example, some would say there is no historic significance, but actually, it has a very strong social significance. It's socially significant to the community because this was our first CCP. Before the CCP was built, this was where
Yes.
everything was happening. And we have to be aware of that, how
Right.
it launched the career of Cecil Licad, how it was the stage
Hmm.
of all of these very famous people who came to visit the Philippines. No, and it was important like that before the CCP came into being. So we have to be cognizant of that. But um, they were looking for things like
Hmm.
did I don't know, things like maybe did Bonifacio visit? Did Bonifacio watch a show there, or um, did any of our national heroes, visit and go to work there? Of course, they didn't because it's a modern building. But we have to find value in our modern history. That is something we have to learn to value our modern history
Yeah.
because this is the history of what makes us who we are as a people. And I think this
Hmm.
valuation was not yet fully
Kumbaga,
explored during that time.
mhm. Yeah, I think the myopia of our history that really could have actually brought about the understanding of how important the film life building was in the community because of those of those events that have happened,
That's
like
true.
the launching of the various careers of the different artists na alam mo yon. Yun nga eh. Doon na natin ako nakikita yung disconnect. And yeah, in hindsight, that was an I think that was
But we have to
a,
learn from
a
that.
bitter a bitter lesson to swallow and to learn. Another
Mm-mm. But it
question
was a
from
lesson.
one of our Facebook viewers.
Yes.
Mhm.
Uh-huh.
I think this is coming from I think this is from our GK Pamana Community Facebook group.
Mm-hmm.
James Cross is asking for Architect Caryn. Should we also be considering modernist houses as part of our building code? part of our conservation efforts? If so, how could we help promote the owners to be a part of the cause?
Ang hirap nito, no? This was something I was actually considering um,
Yeah.
in my study of Luxin, no? Because he built a lot of homes,
Mhm.
and a lot of these homes are still
Yeah.
standing, and they were homes for people in Forbes Park, no? So they were, yeah, built
Mhm.
for a certain audience, but they were designed a certain way, and I wanted to see how they had changed. I wanted to examine them, but sadly, a lot of them have already been renovated. So when I visited a few, I was actually
Mhm.
able to visit a few in Forbes Park. And when I went inside, no, I was like, iba na to. They were kind enough to let me in. They showed me around the house, and I was like, iba na po to, no? Ay, opo, nag-remodel kami. And I was like, I couldn't tell them, no.
Mhm.
I was very thankful they let me into their house, but hindi po ito yung hinahanap ko. So it's very tricky with houses because it's a very personal thing. No, it's a very personal thing. So the owners, if we want to preserve these structures, the owners themselves have to have this conception of ano ba tong modern, bakit ba importante yung house ko? Anong importante sa kanya? Bakit maganda siya? At dapat yung owner
Mhm.
mismo nagagandahan siya sa bahay niya. Kasi sometimes some of the
Yeah.
owners say,
Mhm.
ay, medyo luma na yung interior ko. Pa-interior tayo ng bago. So the
Yeah.
house is still structurally sound. The bones are still there, pero it's a totally different thing, no? I went inside. I was like, oh yes, this is different. The quality of the space is different. But there's a very nice another person, Dr. Jean-Claude Girard from Switzerland. He also did a dissertation on Luxin, and he was able to see some of the plans, no, of the houses, and from there he was able to discern like a tripartite, no, parang entering the house, no, the three parts of the house according to Luxin. No? So that I think that's an interesting way to look at things. Yeah, but
Yeah.
houses are tricky. But it would be so nice to do tropical house of the
Mhm.
50s, 60s, 70s. So nice. Kaya lang, how do we find an example
Yeah.
that's still intact? Sana we can.
Well, yeah. I think I know there's one. We'll talk about it offline. Meron isa,
Ah,
alam ko,
sige,
but it's
please
around
let
the
me know.
1960s. Okay, there's
Pwede
another one
naman.
coming from Anthony Demin Sarmiento.
Mhm.
If, for example, I will design a modern building today, past the Philippine modern architecture timeline, will it be categorized as modern?
Good
Yan.
question. If the style is still of the modern style, but you're doing it today instead of the original timeline, simply the answer is no. That is a modern build. That is a contemporary building. No, that's why we actually defined modern. No, modern. The working definition of
Mhm.
modern is the architecture of this period. No, and our definition of modern is actually it has
Mhm.
ties with it's cognizant of, for example, tropical architecture, but it's also very cognizant of showing our identity as a Filipino because that was during the post-war era. No, we were really thinking about what does it mean to be a Filipino during this time. If we do something that is an echo of those styles, it's simply that it's a contemporary echo, but it's not authentic. It's authentic for this period, it's authentic for this society. But remember, modern architecture is linked to the people, to that ideology that encapsulates the people that produced it. It's not just the building, it's also the people. So if you produce something
Mhm.
that looks like that but does not resonate the same way with the people, no, for who will you design it? And it's for a completely
Right.
different thing. So it looks the same, binihisan mo siya, it looks the same, but it's for a different audience. It's for a different purpose. So my answer to that would
Mhm.
be no. But it would be a nice exercise,
Yeah,
yeah,
you
nice
can.
academic exercise.
Yeah. Actually, parang ano nga eh, parang malalaman mo or kung sanay kang tumingin sa mga ano, sa mga lumang bahay, no? You would
Mm.
know when a particular house was built during the Marcos era. Kasi there
Yes.
are certain sensibilities by the people during that time that
Yes,
reflect
yes.
that is
Mm-mm.
reflected on the build on the house itself. So
Sa
yeah.
decor,
Another
sa
question.
kulay.
Yes. Another question. This one is
Uh-huh.
from Miss Danielle Guillen. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and she's
Hello,
asking,
Dane.
how could experts like you further inspire local government units to build modern built architecture for public use, like public transport terminals funded by the government? Or are there efforts already? And if ever, could you share how LGUs react on this? Thanks.
Hmm. So this is more of the production of new architecture that could be um, well, significant in the future. Now, because we're looking at this group of
Utilitarian.
buildings that was built
Mhm.
during the Marcos period. No, it was built during the Marcos period. We have university buildings, we have research centers, we have cultural centers, we have the heart center, the lung center. All of these, no, these are government institutions, but they were built during a specific
Mhm.
period for the Filipino people. No, and we don't see this kind
Yeah.
of um, building for ano ngayon for what do you call this for public architecture nowadays. No, parang I think we need to examine our priorities. No, our the bidding process, for example. What is our
Mhm.
thrust? You know, because the thrust during that time was to produce an identity for the Filipinos. No, to produce an architecture that we could be proud of. These days, we've lost that kind of pride, that kind of dignity in designing public buildings. Um, yung peg natin
Yeah.
is not anymore to not naman be a showcase, but good architecture. It's more utilitarian, no. But also maybe this is why a lot of the government projects are failing because yeah they fail to respond in something, no? Hindi sila ano, no? Like if you take the CCP, for example, that's a government project, no? But
Yeah.
it's a response, no? There's a response from the people. Of course, the response is both positive and negative, but it's still a response. But the buildings that the government projects these days, walang response eh. Pag dinaanan mo, government project, parang wala kang interest man lang kasi parang it's a government, it's one of
Yeah.
those again, wala siyang character. Eh etong mga buildings nito may pinaglalaban silang character. So I think we need um yeah, someone in power, someone with a vision, someone with taste, someone or someone who picks designers with taste, who is willing to prioritize aesthetics
Yeah.
again. Yeah, because we deserve. I think the Filipino people deserve more than utilitarian buildings. We deserve buildings we can be proud of, buildings we can be proud to show other people that are examples of Filipino architecture. Um, Perhaps dialogues with LGUs could help, always showing them because people are sometimes not aware of what government architecture can be. No, but it can be a lot of things. A waiting
Mhm.
shed, even in our survey in the mASEANa, no, even waiting sheds were beautiful. No, the waiting sheds in UP Diliman, in the SSS building, in the in various other buildings, they were works of art in themselves, and we were like, wow, these walkways, no, and you
Yeah.
it's not the humbleness of the project, it's not the how humble the project is, it's the foresight, it's the designer, it's engaging the right designer, it's prioritizing, I don't know, the bidding process, what's how the bidding process is going nowadays. But yeah, used to be that
Well,
people prioritize architects, now I guess they prioritize contractors. So
so as someone who engages in government bidding myself, I could
uh-huh.
definitely feel how uninspiring government projects can be now. So I think, yeah, you're right. Kailangan talaga as part of the government building projects for infrastructure
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Of course
architecture.
we
There
have
has to
different
be emphasis
priorities
as part
now,
of the procurement and bidding process. Mm-mm.
but yes,
Pero yun nga, you're right na
still. Mm-mm.
we need to to prioritize aesthetics, something that would, as part of the nation building projects, should also have this component of aesthetics that inspire people, projects that would help us
Take us to the next level.
be proud of our architecture. Um, yeah. So I have another follow up question on this one.
Hmm.
And this is in my realization in this in your talk. No, it seemed that majority of the people who can appreciate Philippine modern built heritage are those from the younger generation, no? Compared to the older generation. Ayoko may generalize, but I can see a
Uh-huh.
trend here. And in
Mm-hmm.
particular with with seniors, who are more akin to nostalgia. What do you think we can do to also help older people to also appreciate Philippine modern built architecture?
Ang hirap do sa older people, no, and my parents are actually part of that, no. It's hard for them to see because
Mhm.
they lived through that generation. They lived through that aesthetic, and for them, it's something of the past. No, it's something
Yeah.
um, they can't really appreciate because yun nga, they think heritage should be old. So I think one of the things is yeah, exposure to more talks like this and seeing how in other countries, modern architecture is actually valued, showing them examples of modern architecture in other countries. Luis Barragan in Mexico, for example, Oscar Niemeyer in Brazil. These are good examples, and these actually are comparable to examples in the Philippines. And when they say, may ganyan din naman tayo ah. Ay, maganda pala yan. Ay, maganda din pala yung sa atin. So,
Mhm.
you're trying to change them. It's kind of a roundabout way, no? But that generation kasi they want to
Yeah.
see from the outside in, no? Whereas the younger generation, they're
Mhm.
more from the inside out. They're more about their roots. They're more about um, cementing who they are. But this older generation, they've already lived. They've lived through that. So they're all like, they need a new way to see the reality. And you can do that by showing them other examples in other countries and saying, this is important and this is beautiful. And they say that, oh, I've seen something like that locally. And okay, so that's beautiful also. Yeah, I have these
Mhm.
conversations with my dad, because he's an engineer and he can't quite process why this is important. Yeah, but slowly I hope I'm making a dent. So so slowly he's kind of understanding, I hope, why these buildings are important. But still he's like that, talaga. I get that reaction a lot, but yeah, I hope I'm making a dent.
Final question for you, Architect
All right.
Caryn. As an architect, uh, teaching and advocating for Philippine modern built heritage, what do you think both our government and the academe can do to further foster the study, the appreciation, and ultimately the conservation of our Philippine modern built heritage?
Dialogue, really dialogue. This interconnectivity, which is why I love the mASEANa workshop very much, because um, you get people to care about something, you get people to care about buildings and work with people. No, it in the end, no, we had 20 universities, but in the end, it wasn't about the different institutions. So the mentors, so I remember,
Mhm.
just as an example, no, I messaged one of the mentors like, oh, could you please tell your student that he hasn't submitted his assignment yet, no? Ganun talaga, no? Parang class talaga. He hasn't submitted his assignment yet. Can you please tell him to submit? And the response I got was like,
Mhm.
ay ma'am, hindi ko student yan. Iba yung mga students sa group. He was already thinking of his own group as his students. Sabi ko, ay hindi sa group
Mm.
mo, yung sa school mo. Kasi he was actually the assigned mentor for that school. Ah, sa school ko. So he actually, the the lines of division. No? So we have to take away those lines of division. We have to work together. We have to, take away that sila kami, no, and just have a dialogue with these young people, with other academics, because the more that we talk about modern architecture, the more people realize that, oh, this is important. This is something I can support. This is something I can get behind. And the more people you get toward your cause. So it's a win-win thing. So yeah, that's why you were asking kanina, hindi pa ba ako napapagod sa mga talks, no? But this is one way to get the word out. This is one way to get the word out. This is one platform to tell people that modern architecture is important. And if you would like to know more, you can engage with any one of us. And actually, the chat groups of the mentors for the mASEANa workshop is still alive. I still post things when I get them, like there's a seminar, there's a workshop, and I post it there, and people would react, and people are sharing things even for not for their students. So people are sharing resources, scanned images from old magazines that have ano, and it's the sharing, it's the spirit that will
Yes.
get us somewhere. It's the spirit that will get
Yeah.
us somewhere. Hindi yung pagdadamot. No, it's not pagdadamot because all of this collaboration, it will lead to new learnings, and all that new learnings will all only lead to conservation. So you look at it as a process. You're part of the process. You are not the whole process. You're just a little cog. You're
Yes.
just pushing people along, and you're hoping that, yeah, you make a dent, but you appreciate the people who are involved and the people who make it happen. And I think that's one of the most important things in conservation, in modern architecture. Appreciate the people, let people know, let people have their own opinions, and talk to them about it. Keep on talking about it. May makikinig sa'yo. may
Okay.
matutuwa dun sa topic. So that's it.
I mean, we really appreciate everything that you've done for the mASEANa workshop. I just hope that there would be more people who would have that kind of mindset like you have. And may your tribe increase,
There
Architect
are.
Caryn.
Thank you.
So, maraming salamat, Sir Architect Caryn Paredes-Santillian, for giving us your presentation about the mASEANaPH workshop. And I'm sure ang dami na naman po nating natutunan, especially sa mga nanonood sa atin ngayon. Thank you very much for sharing about your experiences and your insights and your learnings from the mASEANa workshop.
Maraming salamat din, Joel, and thank you to Grupo Kalinangan and to all your sponsors and to everybody who watched tonight. So I hope you picked up something, and I hope that was a good use of your time. So thank you very much.
Yes, definitely. It was definitely a good use of our time. A lot of learnings from this, from the past 2 hours of discussing about modern architecture and the workshop that you did. So again, maraming salamat po. So for all of you who have been watching, I hope you guys have learned a lot from tonight. And we ask you, for those who have registered for our webinar tonight, para makuha nyo po ang inyong certificate of participation via email, please fill out the evaluation form. Para lang po ito sa mga nag-register, okay? Go to this link below, and it's also on the chat on the live stream. Go to https://bit.ly/pamanotalkseval21 May 2021 to fill out the evaluation form for our talk tonight. We'd love to hear your thoughts about tonight's webinar, and you will receive your e-certificate of participation after you've filled out our after you fill out the form. So again, maraming salamat po sa inyong pagsubaybay ngayon. So before anything else, I would like to announce some other things. And of course, we are still, continuing our celebrations for the for our National Heritage Month. So next Friday, May 28, 2021, we still have one more Pamana talk for National Heritage Month. And this time we have invited Monsignor Brian Brigoli. He's going to join us all the way from Cebu. and he's the chairman of the Cebu Archdiocesan Commission on Culture and Heritage. His talk is about Kapanulundanan sa Simbahan sa Cebu, the heritage conservation works in the Archdiocese of Cebu. So please register on our website, grupokalinangan.org/webinars/pamana talks para ma-receive niyo po ang inyong order number and of course be able to receive your e-certificate. Okay? So please don't forget to like us on our Facebook page again. So please okay, napuputol po na naman ang aking internet. Pero like us on our Facebook, Grupo Kalinangan. Also follow us on our Twitter and Instagram. And also subscribe to our official YouTube channel, Grupo Kalinangan. And sign up for our newsletter at grupokalinangan.org. Also, please don't forget to subscribe as well to the mASEANaPH YouTube channel. Caryn would definitely love to have you guys there and watch the recorded talks on YouTube from the mASEANaPH workshop. It's all there. And also like the NHCP official Facebook page, facebook.com/NHCP1933, and the National Quincentennial Committee official Facebook page, facebook.com/NQC2021. And with that, I would like to leave you again with a quote to close our webinar. This time, we have a quote coming from Steve Berry, an American author and philanthropist who is also a renowned heritage conservation advocate. And he said, "A concerted effort to preserve our heritage is a vital link to our cultural, educational, aesthetic, inspirational, and economic legacies. All of the things that quite literally makes us who we are." And thank you very much again for watching Pamana Talks. We'll see you again this coming Friday for our last Pamana Talks for National Heritage Month. In the meantime, stay safe and we'll see each other again. So paalam po sa inyo lahat at magandang gabi po.
Mandirigmang